Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. I'm Gavin Schall. Today, we are going to discuss if Jalen Brunson is a top 20 player and a top 5 point guard in the NBA, plus Dylan Windler in, Trevor Keels out. Quick thoughts on that next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. And I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, because that would make you an everydayer and by default, one of my best friends. If you want to join that exclusive club, hit that notifications bell and subscribe on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And before we get going, I wanted to mention something new we're doing here at Locked On Knicks. We have partnered up with a service called SUBTEXT. Perhaps if you listen to another Locked On podcast, let's just say Locked On Giants, Locked On Jets, Locked On Bills, Locked On Rangers, Locked On Yankees, Locked On Mets, you might already know what SUBTEXT is, but there's a link to join the community in the episode description. Whether you're listening on YouTube or listening on the audio side, you can just click on that link and sign up. And essentially, it gives you the opportunity to text Alex and I whenever you want. We will respond quickly and with an extensive message, basically answering any question that you want to have about the Knicks. And we're also going to be proactive with how we use it. Basically, whenever there's a big signing or trade, let's just say like Dante DiVincenzo, you will be, even before we record a podcast, you will be the first people to get our initial reaction to it. And we are going to do some giveaways. I got to talk to Alex about this. I'm saying this without permission, but I think we'd be up for giving away some Strickland merch, some cool t-shirts, maybe some hats. When we hit 100 subscribers, 200 subscribers, 300 subscribers, but at 500 subscribers, when we get there, the real prize, I will give away one of my most beloved possessions, which is something I've had for about 20 years now, a Stephon Marbury jersey that is signed by both Stephon Marbury and Clyde. So that is really cool. And if you sign up, you'll get an opportunity for that. Tons of bonus content. And the ability to text Alex and I whenever you want with whatever you want to talk about in regards to the New York Knicks. Or if you just want some general life advice, happy to do that for you as well. But who's talking to? Who are you going to be texting? I'm Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster. Okay, without further ado, let's get into the rankings. And I'll start with the caveat that these rankings are not who would you want for the rest of their careers. It's not who would you take for one game. It's not, if healthy, who would you take for a playoff run. It is essentially just who would you want for all of next season. Health concerns considered and playing a significant role in the rankings. For example, I have Kawhi Leonard right around 20. I think if I had a guarantee of a fully healthy season from him, he would probably be third or fourth for me. That is how highly I think about healthy Kawhi Leonard, and also how concerned I am about said health. The other caveat is there's some slight Knicks bias here, as you'll see in my rankings, but this was inspired by CBS's Sam Quinn. Shout out to him, does a great job over there. But he said something I really disagree with, and that was that the Knicks do not currently have a top 20 player on their roster. I'm going to take it a step further. I'm going to say they have a top 15 player on their roster. So without further ado, let me reveal my rankings. If you're watching on YouTube, they'll be up on the screen. If not, just listen along. Nikola Jokic, obvious number one. I don't really feel the need to defend or explain that. Giannis, just a two-way monster. His run in 2021, maybe aside from what Jokic did this year, is probably the most impressive playoffs we've had in the last 5 years. Steph's number 3 because his run a season ago was the closest thing I've seen to that. And I think Giannis is just slightly ahead of him because he is such a defensive monster. But Steph, neck and neck with Jokic and Luka for the best offensive player in the game. And that is why Luka Doncic, despite a season that I can only describe as a little bit gross to me, I had him, I think we might have done this in an episode. I had him as only third team All NBA last year. And that was because I don't think he played winning basketball at points. I thought it was a little bit of the Trae Young effect where he alienated some of his teammates with how ball dominant he was, with how indifferent he was defensively. But when it comes to playoff basketball, I don't think outside of Steph, Giannis, and Jokic, there's really, and a healthy version of Kawhi and maybe LeBron a few years ago. Like, there's no one in the modern game that I would take over Luka Doncic for a playoff series. Like, I think he puts the fear of God into every team he faces, and what he did, embarrassing that 60-plus win Suns team 2 years ago, or still really sticks in my mind. 5, I have Jason Tatum, really similar, just a dominant playoff performer, amazing two-way guy. Even when the Celtics suck, he rarely lets them down for more than a game at a time. This one's going to be a little controversial. I have Jimmy Butler up at number 6. And for me, that is mostly a product of what he's done in the playoffs and being the best player on a championship team 2 of the last 3 seasons. There's no one behind him on this list that can say that. Or sorry, a team that reached the finals. 7 is Joel Embiid. He's kind of the midpoint between where I'd have him as a regular season player, where I think there's a pretty good case for having him second or third right in the mix with Jokic and Giannis, and where I'd have him as a playoff performer, which would probably be more like 10, 11, 12. I'm just kind of averaging it out. I think there's a case for him to even be a little bit lower, but I think that diminishes what he still brings on the defensive end of the playoffs, and the fact that despite all the criticisms of him in the playoffs that are very real, and we got into a bit yesterday, I think his offensive impact sometimes gets underrated because he's still overall good on that end in the playoffs. 8 is Kevin Durant. Coming off the stretch of games this year where the Nets won, I think, 20 of 22. So that's only about 6-7 months ago. I think I would have had KD second on this list. But as someone who follows the Suns very closely, his playoff run scared the crap out of me. I think he is potentially, and I hope I'm 1,000% wrong on this. I hope it was just that he was still getting acclimated. He wasn't 1,000% healthy. The supporting cast couldn't have been much worse. He did not look like the same guy against the Los Angeles Clippers or the Denver Nuggets that he did even a year ago for the Brooklyn Nets in the playoffs. And not even in the same universe as the guy he was 2 years 2 years ago for the Nets in the playoffs, where he almost single-handedly beat the Bucks. He was less efficient. He had more trouble getting to his spots, looked a little less explosive, wasn't putting the same pressure on the rim, wasn't having quite the same impact defensively. And he just looked like he was finally, and it makes sense for a guy who's 7 feet tall and I think now 35, looked like someone who's finally getting a little bit old, and all the injuries were catching up with him. Just a little bit, right? Was still putting up close to 30 points per game, was still doing so even with like a pretty dramatic drop-off in efficiency, fairly efficiently overall. But I don't think I can justify having him higher than 8th. I also don't think I can justify having him lower than 8th because he's still Kevin effing Durant. Number 9, Dame Lillard, 32 points per game. Done. That's really all I got to say about the guy. And there's a reason you could say, well, why do you have Shea down at 16th? It's because Dame's done it in the playoffs over and over and over again. Sure, he hasn't won an NBA championship, but he was the best player on a Western Conference Finals team, which is more than a lot of guys on this list can say. And is probably coming off the best season of his career. There's a pretty good case for having Devin Booker ahead of him. There's a pretty good case for having Devin Booker as high as 6th on this list. He was, again, in the playoffs this past year, probably the second best offensive player behind Nikola Jokic. He was a capital M monster. Not much more to say about it than that. Like it was virtuoso. It was on par with anything I ever saw Kobe Bryant do in the playoffs, at least on the offensive end. Anthony Edwards, very similar. He was incredible in 5 games against the Nuggets. His regular season brings him down just a bit, but his trajectory is that of a guy who I wouldn't be shocked if he was first team All-NBA as soon as this season. LeBron 12th. This is a little bit of a respect one, but also I think fair given what he does in the playoffs. And then we get to Jalen Brunson. And before we do that, I want to take a second and tell you all about our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount. in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to get the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200,000 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, let's make the case. Jalen Brunson as the 13th best player in the NBA. And if you're counting like I am, that would put him as, let's see, 1, 2, 3, the 4th best point guard in all of basketball. Controversial take, right? But hear me out. He led the entire NBA in on-off differential in the playoffs of guys who played at least 250 minutes. The Knicks offense was 36 points better per 100 possessions when he was on the floor. That is 8 points better than anyone else. He averaged 28 points, 5.5 assists, 5 rebounds on 47% shooting, 33% from three, 91% from the line. He was 3rd in the playoffs in win shares per 48 minutes. He was 4th in playoff box plus minus. If I'm remembering correctly, he was top 5 in Raptor, which is 538's catch-all metric. And now you're saying, Gavin, that's an awful lot of playoff stats. What did he do during the regular season? And I would say, I hear you. I think there's a good argument that Donovan Mitchell was clearly a better player in the regular season. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I think, was inarguably a better player in the regular season. I think De'Aaron Fox might have had slightly more of an impact. I think Tyrese Halliburton, you could make the case that he had a better regular season. I'm not going down that Trae Young rabbit hole with you. I think that is the land, to quote Joe House, of basketball perversion. So I'm not going down the Trae Young rabbit hole. I'm not a fan of him as a player. I come at me, Hawks fans, if you want. I'm not gonna say he was better than Jalen Brunson in any context. But Jalen Brunson, I think the difference between him and the point guards behind him on this list is the playoff resume. So let's go through it. Let's just go through the guys behind him one by one, and I'll lay out my case. Jamal Murray, one spot behind Jalen Brunson. Murray won an NBA championship, and he did so as the clear-cut second best guy on the team. The stats between him and Jalen Brunson, you can go through it on Cleaning the Glass, on 538, on Basketball Reference. They are almost identical across the board. Murray was a better three-point shooter. Brunson was far better from two-point range. The overall efficiency is nearly exactly the same. The assists are almost exactly the same. The usage is almost exactly the same. The reason I give Jalen Brunson the edge is because he put up those numbers, not getting to play off the best player in the NBA, not getting to play off the best passing center we have ever seen in the sport. Probably one of the top 10 passers we've seen, period, in the sport. Jamal Murray plays in basketball nirvana, basketball Narnia after the witch died. He gets Nikola Jokic, who is a genius and is a legitimate floor spacing 5. Michael Porter Jr., an elite shooting wing. Aaron Gordon, who's not a great shooter, but at least can kind of space the floor. And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, another guy who has to be respected from three-point range. The reason Jalen Brunson's on-off numbers are so ridiculous is because he got it done playing with nothing on offense in the playoffs. Emmanuel quickly was not himself, and then he was out. Julius Randle was horrific. He had shooting splits that would make your eyes bleed. Mitchell Robinson was stationary around the rim the whole playoffs. Quentin Grimes got respect, but generally could not hit a shot. RJ Barrett was better than he usually is. That was still one of the most inefficient scorers in the entire postseason. He had the worst set of circumstances of any star guy on this list. Maybe outside of Shai, but I honestly with Jalen Williams and Josh Giddey, I don't know if I would even argue that in the playoffs, to be clear, not in the regular season, because Julius was a monster and a big help. But even in the regular season, even when Quentin Grimes was bombing threes, like the spacing for Jalen Brunson was less than ideal. Heck, you had Josh Hart out there who was pump faking his way out of threes that were open by 8 feet. No one had to deal with what Jalen Brunson had to deal with in the playoffs. So that's why he's ahead of Jamal Murray. Donovan Mitchell, clear-cut better regular season player. I'm not arguing that. 28, 7, and 6 in the regular season for Mitchell, 28, 6, and 6. I don't know exactly what he had. He was a beast in the regular season. He's one of the better playoff scorers literally in the history of the sport. You could look it up. He's top 10. Jalen Brunson has taken his lunch and eaten it in front of him 2 years in a row now. I'm not putting Donovan Mitchell ahead of Jalen Brunson. It's 2 years in a row. Donovan Mitchell comes back next year, returns the favor, sure. He can skyrocket ahead of Jalen Brunson. He is a better three-point shooter because of the volume he does it at. He is in a different universe as an athlete. He is incredibly shifty. He is a weapon of mass destruction. And yet, Jalen, on guile and craft and footwork and touch, has beaten him out 2 years in a row. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 31, 5, and 5. 7 more points per game in the regular season than Jalen Brunson. More efficient than Jalen Brunson, despite the fact that he doesn't shoot threes well or on volume. It might be stupid having Jalen Brunson ahead of him. You want to tell me 85% of neutral parties would have Shai ahead of Jalen? I get that. That makes sense. That's totally fair. I can't get there. He has to do it in the playoffs. Does he have Jalen supporting cast? Not yet. He's some really good players around him. Josh Giddey's a teenager. Jalen Williams was a rookie. Chet didn't play. This year will be more telling in that debate. But until Shai does it, it's only hypothetical. Same thing with Tyrese Halliburton, who was, again, like, tell me all about the 10 assists, twice as many as Jalen Brunson, almost twice as many as Jalen Brunson. He's probably a better regular season player. I would hear the argument to the contrary. You can make it compelling. But again, until Halliburton gets it done, I'm having Jalen ahead of him. He's got to do it in the playoffs. So just to clarify my order for people on the listening end, that's Jalen at 13, Jamal Murray at 14, Donovan Mitchell 15, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander 16, Paul George I had at 17. And that's a tough one. There's a case that he should be ahead of all these point guards. There's a case that he should be behind all these point guards. For me, it comes down to the availability. He's played basically half the regular season for a couple of years in a row now. He just hasn't been available. He was at 56 games this year, 31 the year before, 54 before that, 48 the year before that. You cannot, like, if the argument is anywhere close between him and these other guys, like, I'm honestly, I maybe should have had him down another 2 spots. Like, he should not. I have him ahead of De'Aaron Fox. I got to revise that. He should not be ahead of De'Aaron Fox. He probably shouldn't even be ahead of Tyrese Halliburton at this point with all the injuries. All right, so that's Paul George at 17, De'Aaron Fox at 18. I didn't really make the case against De'Aaron Fox. It really just comes down to the shooting for me. Because outside of that, he's a better player than Brunson. He's a better defender. He's better at getting to the rim. Similar getting to the rim, similar finishing there. Better in between game. He's more explosive. Maybe harder to guard in the regular season. The three-point shooting is the only thing that holds me up because the efficiency, I think if we're looking at a world where Jalen Brunson, who is an incredibly efficient three-point shooter in the regular season, ups his volume, I just don't see Fox ever being able to quite match that. Anthony Davis is 19th. Again, same with Paul George. You tell me it's for one game to win a championship. I'm probably taking AD over the point guard group because of what he brings on defense. I might even be taking Paul George over all these guys. But again, it's a full season. Availability matters. Same with Kawhi Leonard. I have the numbers up for those of you watching. 46 regular season games averaged over the last 5 years. He's had one healthy postseason in his last 5. Again, healthy. He is a top 5 player in the league. I don't think that's debatable. He is so rarely healthy, though. And then real quick, rest of the list, just to be a completionist. Bam, Brandon Ingram, Zion, Triple J, Trey, Mikal Bridges, Pascal Siakam, Lauri Markkanen, James Harden, Drew Holiday, Draymond Green, Darius Garland, Julius Randle, Domantas Sabonis. That's my top 35. Debate it. Tell me where you disagree in the comments. That's just my list. All right. We'll be back in just a sec. I want to give some quick thoughts on the Knicks signing Dylan Windler and releasing Trevor Keels. That next on Locked On Knicks. All right, guys, we are back on the Locked On Knicks podcast. The newest New York Knick is Dylan Windler, who's had a fascinating NBA career, exceptionally injury-prone through 3 seasons, played just 3 games this past year, has only played 84 games in his entire NBA career, which you could argue is less than ideal. He came out of Belmont as a shooter who was a quote-unquote classic, sneaky athletic guy, a little bit of a poor man's Dante DiVincenzo. In fact, he got that comp coming into the NBA. The one thing that stands out to me is he was really highly regarded coming into his rookie season. I saw Braden Todd, who does a really nice job covering the Cavs, say he was slated to start his rookie season before he got hurt. A number that impressed me was that he averaged 3.5 rebounds per game in only 16.5 minutes as a rookie, which tells me he's a little bit in the Josh Hart mold in terms of his ability to go and do that, a little bit in the DiVincenzo mode. But at 5 points per game as a rookie, shot 34% from 3. Seems like his confidence from 3 fell off a bit, only 30% his second year. Was 50% last year. Again, that was like on literally 10 attempts. Not even 10 attempts. It was on like 4 attempts the entire season. He was 2 for 4. So nothing to take away from that. I think this is an insurance signing. Like if DiVincenzo got hurt, if Quickly got hurt and DiVincenzo had to move up in the rotation, if Grimes got hurt, you have multiple injuries. This is a deep bench insurance signing that I don't mind at all. As far as the release of Trevor Keels, I've seen some ire, some angst at the idea that the Knicks did not give him a real chance or that was a waste of a pick. There's a 42nd pick in the draft. The vast majority of second-round picks do not last in the NBA, and I know the Knicks have done an exceptionally good job there, and you can make the argument and that they should be held to a higher standard because they found Deuce, because they found Jericho, because of who they found in Quentin Grimes and Emmanuel Quickly late in the first round. I hear you. I think it's okay for them to miss occasionally. I think it's okay for them to make an upside swing. That was always unlikely to result in a rotation player long-term, particularly with how deep the roster was when they made the pick. I don't care that much is the best way I can sum this up. All right, guys, remember to subscribe to the SUBTEXT for bonus content and to be able to talk to us whenever you want. We'll be back tomorrow with a really fun episode. We're going to be talking to someone I mentioned the other day. It's Chris Carlson from Syracuse.com to tell you a little bit more about Nathan Knight, just because, not because I think he's going to necessarily be the end-all be-all for the New York Knicks, but just because I thought it was a really cool story and I wanted more people to hear about it. It's really well written, so I wanted to promote that. But until then, we'll talk to you soon on Locked On Knicks.